We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's special show, we're going to be talking free speech and the First Amendment, the dirty little secret of Joe Biden's jobs numbers, and ask whether the war in Ukraine is even winnable at this point. All that and a whole lot more on today's show. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Recent weeks have seen First Amendment cases hit the Supreme Court. It dominates media narratives, and yet doesn't seem to be improving. I'm, of course, talking about the First Amendment rights of American citizens. Now, we're very fortunate to have with us today Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Mr. Graham J. Noble, to discuss free speech, the First Amendment, and which way the wind blows on this topic. Graham, thanks for being here.
Sure, it's a pleasure to be here, Mark.
So, Graham, neither of us are born Americans, and yet I find fun that we often do talk about the First Amendment free speech, but it's quite unique in the world, isn't it, to have an ability that the government cannot deny your right to speech, and that is unique in the world, isn't it, Graham?
Yeah, it certainly is, Mark. I mean, I think there are a lot of things about the Constitution that make America, talk about American exceptionalism, which is something that has almost become a kind of a bad phrase now, a taboo phrase.
It's a dirty word in some circles, isn't it?
At least on the political left. But yeah, I mean, America is an exceptional country for so many of the rights that are enshrined in the Constitution. I don't know everything about the founding laws of every country, certainly, but I can't personally think of another country that actually has a whole set of prohibitions on what the government can do to its citizens.
Yeah, I think that's the distinction that so many people miss. Like the European Union, for example, or England, my country, we have laws that say they protect free speech, but what they really do is they're placing limits on what an individual can say. A lot of this, especially nowadays, comes under the hate speech rubric. But in America, for all its beautiful exceptionality, I don't know if that's a real word, but I'm going to stick with it. Its beautiful exceptionality, it restricts the government from what they can do to you. And that's the key difference. In
Yes.
all these other countries, the laws are about restricting what you can do. In America, it's restricting what the government can do to you. I think that's such a beautiful thing, and it makes me wonder why we're even having this debate about, well, this discussion about why free speech appears to be under threat. The First Amendment appears to be under threat in the United States, because surely the people who live under that wonderful, wonderful Constitution should be celebrating it, but they're not, are they, Graham?
Well, I think the foundation of this discussion lies in the way the left, the progressive left, views the Constitution, and you see they don't like it for that very reason, that it restricts government. I remember once former President Barack Obama once said this, and I think it was before he actually became president. I think maybe it was when he was campaigning back in 2008. He actually sat down for an interview, and they were talking about the Constitution, and he basically said, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, well, the most fundamental flaw in the Constitution is that it says what the government what the government cannot do to you, and it doesn't say enough about what the government should do for you. And that's that fundamental misunderstanding of the Constitution that exists on the left. They just can't grasp the concept of the government being restricted in its actions. They just can't grasp it.
It's a very, I mean, nobody should be surprised that President Barack Obama had a very statist attitude. So let's branch this out a little bit, Graham. So much communication nowadays is carried out digitally. People are probably watching this either on a computer or listening to it on a radio station. Radio stations are very much becoming digital. But people use social media so much now for not only gathering their news, but for communicating their ideas out to the world. And free speech is a huge, huge issue in this realm. We did mention briefly Biden versus Missouri, which we'll get back to. But it seems to me that social media companies nowadays, there's only really one of the big players, and that's X, knee Twitter, that is selling itself as a free speech platform. And one would think that this should be something that every platform wants to push, right? Because, I mean, what's the alternative? Come and join our platform. We limit what you can say based on our opinions, not yours. I mean, that's the alternative,
Yeah,
right?
it is kind of a painful kind of irony that we actually have social media platforms that do have to, kind of the way they're promoting themselves is by saying, it's a free speech. You shouldn't
It's a
even
free
have to say
speech
that.
free zone. It's
You shouldn't even have to say that, really. I mean, that's kind of like
yeah.
I don't know, that to me that's like a kind of a shooting range having a big sign on the door saying, "We allow you to bring your guns here."
Yeah. It is. It's a strange, but I wonder, because obviously you've still got all these other ones other than X that are still running with their models that they do. I mean, they do some major business. They've got some major cash, but I wonder if people will become disillusioned because what is being restricted, and a lot of people make this point, but nice phrases and friendly chatter don't need the First Amendment to protect them, right? It's alternative opinions, it's combative opinions, it's
Yeah,
forthright opinions that need the First Amendment protection from government,
yeah,
uh, from the government shutting them down. But I think because, especially in today's political climes, if you take one tiny step off the postage stamp size consensus, then
mm,
you're automatically an enemy of the progressive
yeah,
bubble, as it were. And I think that what will happen is once people realize that, well, hang on, I can be targeted too. I
yeah.
think that's what will change. And then people will be like, I'd better just pack my bags and head to X, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the most insidious kind of new trend now is this whole thing about you've got misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. I haven't quite figured out how those categories are kind of separately defined, but
They're defined
that
by their pronouns, of course.
yeah, but that is that that this is the way now. This whole new invention about misinformation and how dangerous it is for people to spread misinformation. It's the way that they circumvent, and it's the way that the
Mm.
Biden administration is completely circumventing the First Amendment because they're basically saying, well, we're not, we're not threatening free speech. This isn't about the First Amendment. We're just simply saying that, you shouldn't be able to post misinformation or disinformation on social media.
Mm.
We're not actually censoring anyone's speech. We're just protecting democracy
Yeah.
by making sure that you don't say things that we have decided are not true.
And of course, in that they give themselves the position of arbiter of what is truth.
Right.
Johnny Cash would be very disappointed. Now, we'll be back with Graham J. Noble after this short break. Don't go anywhere.